Have you ever wondered how this to enter this? Or this? Or this? And have you ever wanted to make millions of dollars becoming a famous DJ? You're watching the wrong video. What it be, what it do, my dudes and dads? My name is Alfonso, and today we are going to be looking into how to make electronic dance musics. But before we start looking into how to make electronic dance musics, we need these 3 important steps in order to figure out what we're going to be doing. The first step is you need a digital audio workstation, or what we bedroom producers like to call it, a DAW. So for DAWs, there are different types of DAWs out there. They essentially do the same thing, which is to make the electronic dance musics. You know, each one provides its own unique elements. For me personally, I use FL Studio. I've been using FL Studio since 2011, and it's worked for me ever since, and I really love the interface and I love the workflow. There's also Ableton. I know a few friends who use Ableton. They love Ableton. It's not really my cup of tea because I like FL Studio because everything is just laid out in front of you. You know, there's also Logic. I don't really know anyone who uses Logic nowadays, but essentially those are the top 3 most popular ones that people use. But for the sake of this tutorial, I want to use the FL Studio because 1, I'm comfortable with it, and 2, FL gang. Now, if you're unsure as to what DAW you want to use, you know, these programs offer free trials that you guys can use, or you can just simply watch videos of them online and how people use them, and then, you know, just willy-nilly just pick one that you like, I guess. Step 2 is pick a subgenre. Now, there are tons and tons of subgenres to choose from in EDM. You know that there's house music, there's dubstep, there's trap, there's happy hardcore, whatever floats your boat, you know, and like really just pick a genre and what you want to make, and, you know, essentially pick the ones that you really like listening to, and, you know, if it appeals to you, then great, all the more to you. It'll be better for you in the long run. Now, step 3, samples. Now, before you all give me flack about using samples, there's really nothing wrong with using samples, especially drum samples, because I don't know, unless you want to make your own drums, right? Then you'll be in one hell of a challenge there. But get some good samples. You know, don't get trashy samples that sound like doo-doo, because we bedroom producers like to use this term. You can't polish a turd. It is what it is. It is a turd. Even though you try to polish it, it's still gonna sound like trash. So go get good samples. If you don't know where to get samples from, there's this thing called the internet, and you can just go on google.com and you can do free samples, and then voila, free samples. Now that you've finished all 3 of those steps, I'm gonna go into my digital audio workstation and show you guys how this EDMs be. Alright, so I loaded up FL Studio, and now before you touch anything or try to figure out what everything does, you have to know how to get around your program. Now, there are 5 important buttons up here that you need to know, and lucky for us FL Studio users, they're all bunched up into one bar, and they're up here. So the first thing we need to talk about is the playlist. Now, the playlist is where you put all of your important patterns, your automations, effects, samples. This is where you stitch everything together. Now, second is the channel rack. Now, and the buttons up here, it's 3rd, but I'm going to talk about the 2nd because it's probably the 2nd most important of the bunch. When you click on it up here, you will get the channel rack, what I like to call the pattern box, because this is a box and you can do your patterns and stuff in it. Pattern box. By default, FL Studio loads up FL Studio samples. You got your kick, clap, hat, and snare, and they're all routed onto different channels in the mixer, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But essentially, you load up a sample or your plugins to make synths, and then once you have it here, you can actually left click on this to get all these crazy options. So now you see that this is a sample, and we can see the waveform on it. So if you click on this waveform, get this really cool sounding kick right there. I mean, it's okay, it's mediocre, but you know, it is something. Now, these buttons are really important for percussion in FL Studio. If you click on one of these buttons right here, and then you press spacebar or play, you'll hear this pattern play out. So right there, as you can see, it plays where the button is lit up. And obviously you can double that up, or you can just take that out using right click. I can right click, hover over it, it'll clear it out. Do the same with left click to select. And if you want to drag it out, you can do that. And essentially, it's how you make patterns in this. The next step that we're going to talk about is the piano roll. And there are 2 ways of getting into the piano roll. So one is either you're in the channel rack, and then right click on your channel, and then go to piano roll. If you click on that, it'll automatically open up the piano roll here. And as you can see, the pattern that we already made on the pattern box is already drawn out in the piano roll. And then as you can see, it's on C5. C5 is the default note for FL Studio. I don't know why. That is what it is. It is what it is. It is what it is. So as you can see here in the piano roll, if you click on any of these piano notes, it'll play. And if you go up, the kick pitches up. And if you go down, it pitches down. And obviously, the lower you go, the longer the sample gets. That's essentially, you're stretching the audio file. And the higher you go, the shorter and the higher pitch it is. Now, the other way of getting the piano roll is up here. So you see, it's pretty straightforward. Now, the next step we're going to talk about is the mixer. And I keep saying that these things are important in order, and really, they're all important. So just scrap what I said earlier. So now this opens all of your channels in your mixer. So this is really important, where if we go back to the channel rack, we have 4 channels going, right? So the kick, clap, hat, snare, they're all different elements. So your kick is routed to channel 1, clap is routed to channel 2, hat 3, snare 4, right? And if we make a pattern, and if we play it all these instruments are going to start playing all at once. And once we press play, we can see where each channel is going to send its audio signals straight into these channels, where it says it's routed over here. So let's press play. And as you can see there, you can see how loud each individual instrument is. And if you want to change, let's say if the snare was a little too loud, we can turn that down here. Same goes for the clap. So the mixer is really where you want to do all the volume changing, and you can also change the volumes on the channels. I don't really recommend that. I'd really just choose the mixer to do all of the volume changing and other things. And finally, you have your library sample. Your library sample is this button right here. By default, it should already be open, or if you want to close it, click on this button, or if you want to open it again, click on this button and it'll open it again. Now that we covered those shortcuts, let's talk a little about music theory. Oh, Fonzo, why do we need to make music theory to make this stuff? That's because I don't want you guys to show your beats to your friends, and your friends are trying to be nice and like saying that, oh, this is fire, and it's actually not fire, and then everyone just kind of... Anyway, a song consists of sections, mainly the intro, verse, chorus, bridge, the whole deal with pop music on the radio. When things are repeating, that's like the catchiest part of the song. That's usually the chorus. Same thing with EDM. Really, it's just the names are a little bit different, and then the structure is a little different. So what's different about EDM is that its structure is like a machine, where typically the structure of your song determines whether or not your track is made for DJs to play. And that's why it's a little different, because for DJs to play like pop radio music, it's a little weird. But for the EDMs, when DJs play the EDMs, it's a little more fluid, and everything is sort of like the same structure, which is nice because, more convenient to play live, right? So, with that in mind, EDM has an intro, a build-up, the drop, and a breakdown. Now, there's no specific order that you have to write these sections in. Like, I used to write drops first, then make the intro from that idea, but I recently found out that it helps with the song progression if I wrote from the intro then on to the drop. And I think it just depends on your style, it depends on your workflow, it depends on your ideas. Like, do you get hype from listening to like do, or just like go straight to the drop, right? Like, you know what I mean? Now, for the sake of this tutorial, I want to use the remix that me and my friend Eric made for 7 Lines' Only Now contest remix contest. Shouts out to DIMSVM. We're a DIMSVM duo. Go check us out. Links in the description. We make pretty fire music. Anyway, back to song structure. Now again, I said that every song requires an intro. I would say it requires an intro. It really gives character to the song. It gives life to the song. And you know, it is the main idea of the song essentially. Now, a lot of these tracks, like in dubstep or like EDMs, are very stale nowadays. There are a few exceptions. Eliminate or Virtual Riot. Well, Virtual Riot, you know, he always dabbles on to like musical stuff, and it sounds very interesting because he knows what he's doing, and a lot of it is music theory. Eliminate, you know, he's a big meme. Shout out to Eliminate if you see this, I love you. You know, Eliminate's got some really cool sounding intros, a lot of it like with the idea that his brand is like this like cybernetic whale, like living underground, attacking like things and eating things. But yeah, the intro is essentially the idea of your track. So let's go ahead and listen to what we have here. So right off the bat, we're introduced to vocals and the piano leads. The most powerful thing that you can portray in a song is a very silent melody. And like these melodies are very subtle, and then the smallest thing can really make a difference. And I guess that's sort of what we were going for in the intro. We wanted to keep that melody going, but also change it from the original, which was a little bit more lively. We wanted it to be a little bit more dramatic, so that's what we went for, like a piano with a lot of reverb. And that's to complement the quiet vocals in the beginning of the song, where the intro is literally just humming. Right, so the intro of the song is actually really short. You know, there are other intros that are extremely long, but as for this song, if you haven't heard of the original, you know, it's very vocal driven. So for this song, when we remixed it, we wanted to keep that same structure, obviously, but also kind of like bring it back to have like a different take on it. So what we did was we wanted to isolate the vocals as it is and build the intro off of that. So from the intro goes into this very like dark, ominous intro thing verse. So this is a verse right after the intro. So as you can see here, the first, so this entire part is the verse. One thing that's different is at the second half of the first verse, we wanted to switch it up a little bit. And that's really important when you make the EDMs, is because you want to keep your listener like pulled in and very, it's like, oh, it's almost like ASMR. It's like you want people to, you know, listen to you and keep on listening to you, if that makes any sense. So with all those drums building up, you know, it goes into the chorus, and then the chorus, the vocals sound like this. When all the voices get too loud. Like, it's very epic, and we thought, okay, so we had the drums in the previous section. How can we change it up to really focus in on that powerful moment where the catchy vocals come in, right? This is the chorus. This is the grand epic of the vocals. So we decided to just cut everything out and just add very subtle elements, just like from the beginning of the intro. So these sections are like changing very quickly, and that's to keep it fresh, that's to keep it very exciting, like, oh, what's going to be there next. So let's listen to the build up. So actually the chorus technically is the build up of the EDMs, you know. So let's take a look here. So as you can see there, the first part was very silent, very quiet, very, you know, subtle. And to switch it up, we brought everything back in, and guns blazing, everything's building up. So here it is, listen to it. Right? So builds up, cuts everything out, and then you have that last phrase, the important phrase, like only now, right? And that's really the highlight of this song, because that's just before the peak, and then the drop follows. So what's important about like breaking down these songs, right? I mean, it's a little different because I'm talking about our own song, but what's important is when you listen to these songs that you like, the songs that are similar to what you want to make, you have to study these songs. Why are they good? Why are these songs as good as they make it out to be, right? Why do people like these songs? And it's because of the dynamic range. It's interesting. Like what makes it interesting, right? Like Slander does a very good way of keeping things interesting by using different melodies, really weird noises, very heavy bass. But aside from the drop section, right? Anything else before that, they keep it very minimal, but very effective. So a lot of these melodies are very catchy. There's some essence and quality in there with the subtle touches that these producers make. And even though it's not loud, you know, the drops, everyone thinks the drops are the most important part. But in my opinion, everything else that support the drop is what's really important. No one's going to want to listen to a doo-doo build-up introduction, you know, portion of the song, because if you're sending your song out to people to listen to, the first impression that they're gonna get is that intro portion and the build-up portion, right? If you can keep your audience engaged in this like audio space, then I'd say you do a good job. You know, if the first thing I hear is just a bunch of static and it's too loud, then I don't know if I want to listen to the rest of the song. And that's why I know that the intro and the build-up is very important. Anyway, coming up from the end of the build-up, right, is where you have the drop section. All right, so now the drop section, obviously this is dubstep. And the thing about dubstep is change over time is always key, because there's a lot of repetitiveness that goes into dubstep. And that's what makes it like really cool, because it's like rocking back and forth and all that. But it gives it another level of crazy like immersion, and like you're always like, oh, what's next? Because that's what works. As you can see here in the first part, so you have the I have that repeat twice, and then on the second part, it's the same thing. It's just pitched down by 1 octave. 1 octave means 12 notes down. Same note, just lower. You have the kick and the snare samples. Very simple. That's literally it. Add in some hi-hats for your percussion. Sorry, those are cymbals. These are hi-hats. Right? And you have your white noise, like your special effects. And then your background. Right? So while you're listening to that, it's actually very quiet. Like these elements are very quiet, but if to put together, they're actually very loud, and that really fills up the space. So now with the bass, essentially your drop is, you know, arguably the most important part, like I said earlier. Maybe not what I said earlier, but it's really, there's really not much going on here on the drop. So now At the second part of this drop is we switch it up even more. So we end it with this melodic theme to keep it fresh again. Right? So drop one is done, and next up is another build up. Now, some songs probably will continue or end right there with the drop, at least. After the drop is usually a breakdown where it leads to either another intro, or not really an intro, but it's sort of like another version of an intro to lead onto the second part of the song. But for us, we wanted to keep the energy going. We wanted to have another drop, another build up right after the first drop. And yeah, I mean, it's really just what you feel like doing. You could literally do anything you want. So here's the other build up. So as you can see there, we switched up the drop to a psytrance drop because we were like, why not? Because it sounds really cool. This buildup is very similar to the first buildup, right? The only thing that's different is, you know, some variation of the vocals, more drums, more risers, make it sound more epic and, like, you know, to match the energy level from the main drop to the next drop. And we wanted to really keep the intensity of the track, but also not keep it the same way. We wanted to keep evolving in a way to keep the audience listening, and then, you know, having them intrigued with like what they're hearing. We wanted to make a fake out drop. We give people what they expect, but not really, because it switches up to psytrance, and that's what makes it more exciting. And, like, you know, taking it to the next level is really, really exciting. So here it is. So what's really important about, like, changing genres in your song is that you really have to know about these genres. Because if you're a dubstep guy, you don't really listen to trance or psytrance that much, then that's fine. But if you're going to try to do something like this, you really have to know, like, the pacing and the structure and, like, what works, what doesn't work. And each genre has its own unique way of doing them. So after the psytrance part, we go into a breakdown, and it leads back into the second verse of the original vocals. So as you can see, after the psytrance part, since it's so explosive, we literally put an explosion right at the end to sort of, like, break it down. That's the end of that part. And then you can hear the vocal chops, and then the risers come up here, and that's to signal whoever's listening that there's more. So it's sort of like subtle things like that you really need to keep to pay attention to, and those subtle things really make a big difference. And here is the final drop. Again, we wanted to keep evolving the song, and this right here is another genre. So yeah, that's the third drop. you know, I like it. I like how the energy flows in this sort of like composition, and that's that. I mean, it's super simple. Again, we have the intro, we have the build up, we have the drop, build up, another drop. So I guess you could say this entire section is a drop, and then breaks down, goes into the second verse, and then build up again, and then the finale drop, and then the outro, right? I mean, like, this isn't, I didn't show how to actually make it, but this is essentially the steps on how you should start going about writing the EDMs, right? And yeah, I hope you guys like that video. You know, subscribe if you guys want to see more stuff like this, or even like an in-depth breakdown of this entire track. Yeah, links in the description if you guys want to hear the full version of the song. And smash that like button again, bucket. Smash that like bucket, and hit that notification bell to know when I upload the next video, which is probably, again, breaking down this song. And if you guys have any suggestions or anything else you want to know about production, or, you know, anything about DAWs, or, you know, all that good sorts of stuff, you know, just go follow my social media, leave a comment down below, and yeah, let me guys know. And I hope you guys like that video. Again, see ya.